The Electric Rodeo is an adult toy megastore podcast about sex, toys, pleasure, and relationships.
It contains adult themes, adult language, and probably too much information about our sex lives.
Sorry, Mum. Kia ora everyone, welcome back to the Electric Rodeo. I'm your host, Emma Hewitt.
And I'm involuntarily peeing myself with excitement about this episode. Touch ball!
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And very shortly, everyone's going to know why you're pissing your pants out.
And they're going to hear about when I did it previously.
So it's already episode 7, which is wild.
Crazy. It's been a crazy time.
Yeah. How you going? What's been going on? Doesn't time fly when you're busy trying to knock a whole bunch of shit off your bucket list?
Yeah, it does feel like that. I'm in a bit of a dry spell with the bucket list stuff at the moment. Just got a lot going on, and it's winter. People have been sick. I get sick, and then my partner gets sick 5 days later. So I have not been making as much progress I want. I still have been having sex, so I can't really complain. But I need to, get on to it.
Yeah.
Next time, I promise.
I'm feeling a bit the same. I feel like we've been talking about a few of my items already. And other than getting into the magic, which is super fun, my favourite thus far, nothing else.
Okay, so is your life more magical at least since we recorded the episode?
I think so. And we're it's always me and Jay, but we're working hard to make things magical and checking in to make sure each other are doing magical shit, which has been very fun. And I've been just feeling good. I feel a bit lighter than maybe where I was at a couple of months ago, which is nice as well. And maybe I'm making it up, but I'm correlating the two.
It's the magic
in my head. But that's what I think it is. I think it's the magic.
I think so. I think that's a fair guess. And it was such an enlightening episode. It was so nice having Vixen in, chatting to her, learning lots. I feel a little bit more magical and lighter, I must say. So I'm with you.
You were proper into it. I'm like, this is going on her bucket list when she does an update for sure.
My bucket list is double. My bucket list is just starting to replicate your bucket list. But that's fine.
I feel like by the end of the season, mine will be replicating yours as well.
One big bucket list. We may as well just start ticking them off together.
Yeah. I agree. Season 4, we just swap bucket lists.
Oh, now there's an idea.
Not a bad idea. So on that note, this episode is my opinion, the most important one of the season for our listeners. So if you're going to pay attention to any of them, this is the one. Okay? Thank you so much. So this episode, we are talking about the pelvic floor. Dum, dum, dum. I have one. You have one. Everybody has one. It's very Oprah up in here, but it's true. And I think that unfortunately we tend to only hear about our pelvic floor and what they do and the importance of them in relation to being pregnant or following having a baby. And that's obviously a very important time for you to be educated and to know about it. But you also need to understand how it works for the rest of your life in general. Well, and we're talking to all genders.
Exactly. This is what I was about to say. Those two things are something that's experienced specifically by AFAB people, whereas everyone has a pelvic floor. So I think there's going to be some key takeaways for everyone. And I'm excited to get a bit more educated and for our listeners to get a bit more educated.
Yeah, me too. So we've got a really amazing pelvic floor physiotherapist coming in today. Her name is Caitlin Fris. She is based in Auckland in Aotearoa, and she is just a wealth of knowledge on this topic. So it's super exciting. But we have both had our own very different experiences with our own pelvic floors. Yeah. So Tash, you go first. Tell us the tale of your pelvic floor.
Delightful. Well, if anyone has listened to my episode Season 2, Good Vibes with Tash Ball, my debut episode.
Tune in now if you haven't.
It's a great episode if I do say so myself. I touched very briefly on my use of Kegel balls and why, but to go in a bit more detail, essentially I think from the point of starting puberty, I've actually had a weaker pelvic floor. The funny thing is I would always say I have a weak bladder, but I don't think that's the case because it first started on trampolines. I don't know, I used to chalk it up as getting really excited. But to be honest, like there just kind of became a period in my life as I went through puberty that I realized when I would jump on trampolines, I would start like peeing a little bit every time I bounced, and I didn't really understand why. So I think I kind of avoided trampolines for a little bit. We went on them a lot because we had our cousins and our childhood like family friends had trampolines, but then kind of later stage life, I have not been on them as much. And then that was an isolated thing that obviously went away. I wasn't really going on trampolines as much. And then kind of coming into being a young adult, I was indulging in an activity which resulted in me coughing often, and it was something I would cough a lot most days.
Sucking dick or...
Emma.
Sorry.
And yeah, when I would cough, I would, again, just like pee myself a little bit. And it was always just like a little bit, but very frustrating, not very fun. It's happened so much that like George calls me pissy pants.
Oh, so George.
It's quite funny because it became a meme in our whole flat with our friends. So like sometimes I would cough and I go, oh no. And then he'd go, oh, you pissy pants. I'd be like, shut up. Yeah. And then I started working at ATMS and, learning stuff, having all the correct conversations, and realized that it might be a pelvic floor issue. So I got myself some OVO L1 Kegel balls.
Cute.
But I started using that, honestly, not super frequently, literally just like maybe once or twice on the weekend when I'd be doing my laundry or something. And it was such an instantaneous change. Like I think I used them maybe twice, and then the next time like I had a coughing fit and I was like, oh my God. So I always sing Kegel balls praises. I'm definitely interested to know if there's kind of other stuff I could be doing. I know about, pelvic floor exercises like the people you see on TikTok, and I like to do the little like squeezes.
Oh yeah, cute.
In time with the music. But yeah, for me it was like a relatively quick fix once I started using those. And every now and then sometimes I'll have a coughing fit and it'll happen again, and then I'll go, cool, just time to use my Kegel balls, and then maybe I'll use them like a couple times within a couple weeks, and then
so you don't do that. You don't do it frequently then? You're not like daily?
No, at first I was doing it daily for like a couple days, and then I went out to weekly, and then I've been lazy and I don't do it super frequently.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I guess I'm quite lucky in that regard. But yeah, if you ever catch me at like the events or expos we do, I'm always singing the praises of the Kegel balls, because for me it was an annoyingly big deal. Like there are certain things I didn't want to do, especially as a child.
A life without trampolines. What kind of life is that?
What a sad life.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm very happy. But what about you? Very different story.
Totally different situation,
Less peeing yourself involved in your one, so a little bit more dignity left there for you.
Oh, yeah, maybe. My situation was kind of the first thing that I noticed was like basically what I thought was happening was I was getting frequent UTIs. I was getting just like a lot of pretty intense pelvic pain, stinging while I was peeing, all of the kind of classic stuff. And at first I was like, oh, this is kind of annoying. Like it seems to be happening more and more often. This is like years and years ago now, and didn't really think too much of it. And then it started to happen like a lot. Like I would say at least once a month I was having it. And it writes you off for like a couple of days at a time.
UTIs suck.
It's horrendous.
I've only had like 3 in my life, and that is enough.
The pain is just diabolical. And around the same time I started having quite painful intercourse as well. So I started to feel heaps of pain, and my partner was saying like, yeah, your muscles are feeling tight. And I was like, yeah, it's because in my head I'm like, it's going to hurt. So, like your body will naturally just tense up and contract. And then started going to the doctor a lot, and, they were doing some tests for UTIs. They never found anything, but I was taking antibiotics anyway because they just assumed that that's what it was. And so this was like probably 4 years of going on antibiotics pretty frequently.
Wow.
And I was just like, surely this is not it. Like you've never found anything. There's never been any infection to cause the pain or anything. And so I just started doing my own research. And, it was around the time that I was learning a bit more. Like I was starting to, I don't think I was training to be a sex educator yet, but before I did formal training, I was doing a lot of like self-taught. And so I started to kind of look into things, and eventually went and saw a pelvic health physiotherapist, which is the person, well, not the person we're talking to today, but with the same occupation as who we're talking to today. And they actually told me that what they think that I had was in fact a really hyperactive pelvic floor, which was actually clenched all the time. And because everything in the pelvic region is so connected, it means that because my muscles were constantly contracting, they were putting pressure on my bladder. So that's what was causing the UTI symptoms.
Okay.
So the pain.
So they weren't actually UTIs?
No. So the pain and the irritation was from the pressure that my muscles were putting onto my bladder.
Right.
And then the pain from sex is because my muscles were completely contracted all the time.
Yeah.
And then also, but that can cause the same thing. So because your muscles are completely clenched all the time, it can cause a weakened pelvic floor, because in order to contract and strengthen properly, you have to also be able to release properly.
Yeah.
And I couldn't release. So when I went to get checked out, she was like, yeah, we need to like do relaxation exercises, which is a lot of breathing work.
Right. And have you seen much of a change?
Life-changing.
Wow.
So every now and then I will still get some of those similar, what I call UTI symptoms. So every now and then I'll get a little bit of like pain and irritation. But that's generally if I go for a while without doing my breathing exercises, or if I drink a lot of sparkling wine, which I am quite prone to drinking a lot of, and it's just bad for your bladder. Yeah, it's bad for your bladder. So if I'm kind of doing those two things in unison, so not doing my exercises and drinking too much, then I can have problems again. Okay. But yeah, so it has worked. And this is why I was like, this is just such an important conversation to have.
Yeah.
Because people, like you said, you didn't really think about it when you were younger. No. You thought it was a bladder thing. Yep. I thought it was a UTI thing for years. And it takes actually seeking out this knowledge to find it, because we're not told this anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that all of our listeners like have their own little stories or, you know, irritations or things that they haven't understood are actually connected to the pelvic floor as well. Today on the podcast, we are so excited to have Caitlin Fris, the vagina physio, with us. This is a topic that is very dear to my heart and also to Tasha's as well. So we've both gone through our own little
pelvic floor
experience and education in the last couple of years. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited.
My pleasure. Excited to be here.
So let's start with a bit of background about you. So who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Caitlin Fris and I'm a pelvic health or a pelvic floor physio. So we work specifically with a layer of muscles inside the pelvis that give us control over our bladder and bowels, but also sexual function. So I work mainly in the pre and postnatal population at the moment, but I also do see other populations like people with painful sex or painful periods, so like endometriosis and stuff like that. Like the other day, I saw someone who wanted to have pain-free anal sex, so it can be sort of a pain sex thing for people with penises too. So so within pelvic floor physio, quite a niche physio, but you can kind of even specialise further into different groups.
Yeah, I feel like everything I hear about it is just like this new stuff all the time that I maybe haven't considered before. It seems like it actually is a very like vast space to be working in. So your name on social media is the Vagina Physio, which I love. And where did that name come from?
Well, there's just like no beating around the bush, excuse the pun. It was basically, I just started it because I was kind of talking to my friends about all of the stuff that I was learning in my postgrad, and they were all like, had no idea about pelvic floor and bladder stuff and bowel stuff. And I was like, well, I'll just start a page and see how that goes. And they would introduce me as a vagina physio to their friends.
Makes sense. Oh, cool. Yeah. Do you ever run into issues on Instagram because you've got vagina in your title?
Not really.
Oh,
no. I mean, occasionally I get like someone in, Egypt or something that I just block them.
Yeah, okay.
Fair enough. That takes offence to the name or?
No, like a CD person.
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah, no. So, I mean, let's talk about the pelvic floor and why it's so important. Can you talk us through exactly what it is and what it does?
I'm wary that this is a podcast, so I usually get the model of the pelvis out.
And we'd love to see it. Please.
Okay, cool. So here's your pelvis. So this is the pubic bone at the front, or like kind of, when Michael Jackson grabs. And then these are your hip bones where you kind of rest your hands when you're grumpy. And then the spine is at the back and the sacrum is that bony sort of V-shaped plate. And then the tailbone or the coccyx is right down the bottom there. So your pelvis is a bony ring, but you don't have any bone at the bottom. So you need something to hold everything up inside of you. So that's one of the roles of the pelvic floor, which is all that red stuff down the bottom there. It kind of makes a hammock or a sort of diamond shape-ish muscle right at the base of the pelvis. And it has 4 main roles. So it gives us continence, so stops leakage of urine and feces when we laugh, run, sneeze. It gives us sexual function, so it plays a role in sensation and also an orgasm, and also it usually plays quite a big role if there's pain during sex. Yeah. It gives us stability to our low back, hip and pelvic joints. and it holds everything up inside of us. So we have 3 pelvic organs attached to our 3 passages. So at the front is the urethra or the urine tube, and then behind that is the vagina, and then behind that is the anus. So people with a penis, it's pretty much exactly the same anatomy, just minus a hole.
Yeah.
Like we all have pelvic. So the bladder sits at the front of the pelvis, just to give you an idea of how it works as a support structure. And then this is the uterus and the ovaries at the side there, those red bits. And then the vagina is behind that. And then the rectum or the back passage sits like that. So all quite closely packed and resting right on the pelvic floor. So really just showing how it supports everything and how it's really rare to have an issue with like painful sex and not have any issues with like your bladder or bowel or back or anything like that. So it's all because it's all so closely related. So yeah, that's the pelvic floor.
For people who are assigned male at birth, like you touched on that you do see men as well, like what kind of a ratio split would it be and what sort of kind of more specific things to them do you help with?
Mostly because I've got young kids and my business partner, who also is a physio, has babies as well. I think we just kind of attract the like pregnancy and postnatal population as our main clientele, but people assigned male at birth will find me somehow. I don't know. Maybe through urologists or, you know, their friends talking about it.
Yeah.
So very small percentage, but I know that other pelvic floor physios will have quite a big referral stream from urologists in particular.
Right.
Who work with like the bladder and the urethra and the penis and stuff like that. So they'll see more. It's just kind of who you sort of target your marketing.
Makes sense. Well, I mean, that's good that they're still coming forward despite the vagina in the name. Although I suppose that's not actually in the business name.
Yeah.
So
we were quite careful about not being really like female vagina specific. So
yeah,
good business practice.
Yeah, I know that you also teach like yoga classes and Pilates and bar as well. What role does that play in pelvic floor health?
Most pelvic floor dysfunctions, the pelvic floor will be quite affected by the form of exercise you might do. So if you are overloading the pelvic floor quite a lot over time with things like high impact exercise, so like running or jumping, or lifting really heavy weights, or doing a lot of excessive core strengthening, that can actually have a detrimental effect on our pelvic floor. It can do one of 2 things really. It can actually make your pelvic floor weaker over time, just from the pressure and over again on the structure. Or it could actually train without you really knowing it. You're kind of training that muscle to switch on and be overactive or contracted all the time. And that often presents as pain. So pain with penetrative sex or pain with a tampon or pap smears, or even like bladder leakage can be actually from an overactive pelvic floor, even though it's mimicking a weak pelvic floor.
Right.
Yeah. So we wanted to provide a place where our clients could kind of come when they were pregnant and do some pregnancy classes. And then when they were after they had their baby, bring their baby along to our postnatal classes, and then be able to work their way up through the to the more challenging dynamic reformer classes.
Right.
Yeah, and we're because we're physios and we're very passionate about exercise. We just know that strength training is really important for postmenopausal or older people for bone health. So we just wanted to provide a place that we could give people our knowledge basically to the masses.
Yeah, that's so cool because I like to exercise quite a lot. But I've had issues with an overactive pelvic floor. And so I've been kind of working through that and trying to do the best things that I can for my body. But I was recently wanting to start running. And then I read that it's not very good for it. And I was like, oh, shit. So I do Pilates and I do yoga. So I was like, okay, I'm doing some of the good stuff at least. But I was like, damn it, I want to get running.
But it's really individualized. Some people particularly when they're overactive pelvic floor, if it's going to calm your brain down, that can have actually a positive effect on overactive pelvic floor. Because if we're just stressed all the time, exercising, and
we got everything.
So it's about figuring out which balancing it all out, I think.
There you go. So
there we go. There we go. Oh, now I'm going to have to do it.
Damn.
So unfortunately, I think that our education around kind of pelvic floor health in Aotearoa and probably globally, actually, it's very reactive. So this isn't something that I knew a lot about, and I've been finding that kind of anecdotally through friends and family as well, that you kind of don't have an opportunity to learn about what is good for your body and what's not good for your body and what could be causing issues until you're already maybe struggling with something. How do you think that we can kind of provide better education around pelvic floor health at a societal level?
Yeah, so interestingly, over in the UK, they just made a big in-depth investigation into Have you heard of vaginal mesh to help fix a surgical prolapse?
Yeah.
So it's basically a surgery that they do for vaginal prolapse, which is when one or more of the vaginal walls have stretched and the pelvic organs are dropping into the vagina, quite uncomfortable.
Right.
And so historically, they were just putting pieces of mesh in and holding everything up, which is kind of what they do for like a hernia repair. A lot of the time it works quite well, but for about 10% of people, they get really, really bad side effects like chronic pain and bladder issues and bowel, and it can be really pretty horrible, and you can't really it's really hard to get the mesh out.
Yes.
So in the UK, the NHS looked into why this was happening and what they can do better. And in that report, it's called the Cumberledge Report, which came out in 2020, I think. They basically advise that pelvic floor health, or the education around it, should start in school.
Yes.
And it should be funded, all that education. At the bare minimum, it should be at school, and then also taught to people in their antenatal classes. And then there should be funded care after birth. And then I think in that same report, they also said that there should be some funding around the menopausal years as well, because things kind of go downhill after that.
Right.
So we know that, it's research backed that we should start caring and looking after and having a bit of knowledge about our pelvic floor when we're at school, going through those like pretty formative pubescent years.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah,
right?
so I think there's probably a way that we can have some funding to, add it to the health class at school,
Is there any government funded type, like, for this type of care in Aotearoa?
There was a really exciting time last year in the pelvic floor world where ACC started to cover birth injuries where historically they hadn't.
Wild.
So as of 1st of October 2022, any births that happen on that date onwards, there is a list of injuries that ACC will cover, which is the majority of them. It doesn't cover all of them, which we're not quite there yet.
Still something to work towards.
Yeah, so that's a big help to women and birthing people in Aotearoa. It's like a step forward to health equity, but there's still a bit to go. There is also pelvic floor physios in every DHB around the Motu. So, you can get referred to one of the physios through your public hospital. It just depends on, postcode lottery, DHB, how long the wait list is, and also whether your condition warrants a referral. So some people might be declined because they're not bad enough or something, which is right. So there's help out there. There's funded help out there, but I think there's always so much more that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you think that healthcare practitioners, like in general, have enough knowledge around pelvic floor health to identify some of the issues? So personally, I struggled with what I thought was recurrent UTIs for years, probably 8 years. And I was going to the doctor pretty frequently about them for about 4 of those years. They never found any kind of infection, but I was constantly put on antibiotics to try and treat something that it turns out wasn't there. So it wasn't until I did a bit more research and just decided I was going to see a pelvic health physio myself that we figured out that it was probably actually caused from the hypertonic muscles, pressing on the bladder and causing irritation and pain. So I was just like, oh man, I've been taking antibiotics for 4 years without really needing to be. And I'm sure I can't be the only person that is happening to. Have you heard stories similar to this?
Look, I think I don't want to, be GP bashing because there's so many great ones out there, and they have such a hard job. They need to know
everything,
so much about everything in your body. Yeah. But it also depends on their interest and their experience as well. So, I hate to say it, but older men GPs probably don't pick up on sort of subtle things that a younger female might tell them, Yeah. And I have heard some pretty terrible advice particularly about painful sex from male GPs come through from my clients. But there are also really awesome and onto it and great ones out there. So if you're not happy with or you're not getting anywhere, my suggestion would be to go to another GP.
Very good advice. So what should we be doing to look after our pelvic floors? Obviously, Kegel balls are one that kind of gets thrown out a lot, and it seems to be kind of a general helps with everything, but that probably isn't the case, I imagine.
No. So, Kegel balls are a funny one because I very rarely suggest them.
Really?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm so surprised.
The research shows that actually just sitting there and doing your pelvic floor exercises, like your contractions, is just as beneficial as using one of those devices.
Right.
And for a lot of people, particularly in the population that I work a lot with in the postnatal period, is, just putting, like, take your pants off, put something in your vagina is actually quite a big barrier to doing these exercises.
True.
It's all about your kind of personality. So if someone likes, a physical thing that they can get feedback from, if they like that visual biofeedback on their phone when you're playing the game with
you got the app.
Then absolutely go for it. My only suggestion would be to see a pelvic floor physio first, because with a lot of those devices, they can pick up a false positive contraction. So, i.e., you could be actually bearing down on the pelvic floor rather than lifting up, and that the device registers that as a positive contraction. And if you actually do that over time, it will make your pelvic floor weaker and worse.
Oh, shit. Okay.
So I recommend a pelvic floor check to make sure that you're doing it correctly, because about 30% of people with vaginas think that they're squeezing their pelvic floor, but they're doing something different. And about 50% of those people are actually bearing down on their pelvic floor rather than lifting up. So it's actually probably kind of cheaper to get a pelvic floor assessment rather than spending $300, $400 on some internal devices and actually end up making it worse over time.
Yeah. We are learning so much today. And on the flip side of that, is there any everyday things that we should be mindful of or avoiding for the care of our pelvic floors?
One of the things that can make a pelvic floor weaker or worse over time is constipation. So good bowel health is really important. We spend a lot of time in most of our appointments talking about bowel emptying, constipation, avoiding straining, all of that, because that can make a big difference to any other symptoms like painful sex or prolapse or bladder leakage even. So number one, if you come in and see one of us about your bladder urgency or bladder leakage, don't be surprised if we focus a lot on your bowels on that first appointment, because that will often make a whole lot of things better. Constipation, making sure that you are doing the pelvic floor exercises correctly if you do need to be doing them. So again, like I kind of touched on before, if you have an actual overactive pelvic floor and you think, I need to be squeezing it and strengthening it, if you actually just work on squeezing and contracting and strengthening it, can again make your pain or UTI symptoms or bladder issues worse. So making sure that you're doing it correctly is a really important thing, and the only way to really know how to do that is to have an assessment with one of us. So and then there's lots of other stuff that we go into, individualized advice for the clients, and we tailor it to their problem. So lots of other things that we talk about.
Cool. Are you finding it's really hard to sit here talking about this without squeezing your pelvic floor?
Yes.
I'm sure maybe you probably don't have the same issue because it's something you do every day, but I'm literally sitting here like, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah, same. I was like, am I pulling up or am I pushing down? That's so true. Yeah,
I love that we're all thinking about our vaginas.
I know. Yes. Well, that's what we want on a podcast like this anyway.
Yes. So. We only come in here to think about our vaginas and nothing else. So the pelvic floor plays a bit in sexual functioning. Can you talk to us a bit about that, please?
In people with a vagina, the lower third of the vagina, so the vagina is the tube that goes from the uterus or the cervix to the outside world. We have most of our sensation, like the least sexy way you can explain a vagina.
The party zone.
And the lower third of the vagina is where we get most of our sensation. So above that, we actually don't have much in terms of nerve endings. The majority of that is because that's where our pelvic floor muscles wrap around, and they provide sort of tension and support and a lot of sensation as well. We've got a few layers of our pelvic floor. The deeper ones provide sensation, and then the ones that are sort of closest to the entrance of the vagina, if I show you the model. So that's the clitoris, the clitoral head there, and then the urethra or the urine tube is there, the vagina, and then the anus here. So you can kind of see that there's this perineal layer of muscle, which is sort of closest to the entrance of the vagina. And then you can see this deeper layer here. They're called the levators. These are mostly here for continence and support and control, but they do play a role in sexual sensation. But the perineal layer is often there to kind of close around the vagina, and it sort of plumps up during arousal. And it's this muscle here called bulbospongiosus, which sounds like a dinosaur or something.
Fabulous name.
Lies right over the top of the clitoral bulbs, because we know that the clitoris is the tip of the iceberg,
Yes.
And then we've got the bulbs which wrap around the entrance of the vagina, and then the legs which come out the side too. So these muscles here will engorge during arousal, and then they provide sensation as well. So these often are quite overactive in those who have painful penetrative sex, and can be quite tender to touch. But with orgasm, an orgasm is usually a rhythmic contract and relax of our pelvic floor muscles, plus or minus maybe some uterine contraction too. So again, it's like any other muscle in the body. If you strengthen it up, the stronger the sensation in the orgasm is.
Yeah.
If it's quite weak, like some people like after having a baby might say, it just can't feel much.
Yeah. Okay.
But then when we work on their pelvic floor, they get much more sensation and the nerve endings are happier and things like that. So they play a role in pleasurable sex, but they also can contribute to pain during sex and these issues there too.
So yeah, I've been increasingly hearing the term that like painful sex is common, but it's not actually normal. And that doesn't sound very good to me. I'm not enjoying this. And along with some of those other issues that I've experienced, painful sex is one of the things that I have also had to deal with quite a bit. You know, I eventually found out that it was being caused from some pelvic floor issues. But like, what are some of the other things that can kind of cause pain with sex so that we know like what we're looking for and what to kind of like rule out, I guess?
Whenever somebody comes to me with painful sex, if they haven't come through their GP or a sexual health physician, I always really want them to have some swabs done because, you know, any infection or UTI or STI or anything like that, we really want to rule out. And, you know, some of them can just sort of be rumbling along and not really causing any other symptoms. So really just want to rule out anything like that. The other thing that I would be asking about is about their periods. So if they're having pain with periods is kind of normal, but we should be able to sort of get on with our day and take an over-the-counter medication if needed and then fine. But if it's disrupting your day-to-day life and you're having to take maybe time off work or you're having to change how you live and it's really disruptive, then that is abnormal. So I would be sort of probing a little bit more into the possibility of things like endometriosis, which is a painful period syndrome, and painful sex can be one of the main symptoms of that. So I'd be asking a little bit about that too and whether they need referral into gynae. If all of that is clear, then I'd be looking at the pelvic floor. So it's really about it's also the bladder and the bowel. So if you have a really sensitive bladder, that can cause pain during penetrative sex. And also even IBS if you're having a flare or like inflammatory bowel disease or something like that, that can, you know, obviously, as I said, they're really closely packed in there, so that can be quite painful too. So with all of that stuff, you can then get this underlying muscle spasm because any pain in the pelvis or even the abdomen or around the hips, our pelvic floor is going to often contract or want to guard and protect the area. Those muscles can become a source of pain themselves. So during penetration or even during arousal, sometimes people get a bit of pain because those muscles are just like, you know, when you go to the gym and you work out your thighs or whatever, and then the next day it's like, if I prodded you on the thighs, that would be pretty sore. Jump off your seat. So I kind of use that analogy for your pelvic floor muscles. If they're just on all the time, they're going to get this biochemical things going on that can trigger the nociceptors or the pain receptors. And then it can sort of set up almost like a vicious cycle because your body then learns and your brain learns that penetrative sex is painful. So then when the next time you are becoming intimate and it's heading that way, before you even know, your brain is starting to be like, this is going to be sore. And so I'm going to contract. I'm going to close off the pelvic floor and like shut up shop and nobody's allowed in. And then you kind of, then you're going to cause painful sex and things like that. So it's it can be a sort of never ending cycle if not addressed.
Yeah. I know all about that one, unfortunately. And this is why I think it's so important that we do get education about this up front. Like even seeing the model that you have and actually understanding how close everything is to each other and how connected it is. Because of course you can hear it, but until you really see it like that, like when I went to my first physio appointment, I just left elated because I was like, I actually feel like now I understand and I'm going to be able to make the right changes to do something. And I was like, everyone has to do this. Everyone should have an opportunity to have these discussions and actually learn it. And I'd already been working in like the sex toy industry and I'm doing a sex educator certification at the moment. And so I was like, I feel like I know some stuff, but going in, I was like, this is actually just beyond anything that I think like read about or learn about. Actually seeing it just makes a world of difference to me. So I hope that people that are listening will, if they're having problems, they'll go and see someone too. Yeah. So if you are someone like me that's working through having painful sex, and penetrative sex isn't obviously the be all and end all of everything, but there are some times that it's just a nice thing to be able to do and that I would like to do with my partner. So for us, We use a bumper sometimes, which prevents the depth of penetration, so helps to keep it quite shallow, which is quite nice for us. And obviously like a whole lot of silicone lube. Uber lube is my favorite. But what are some of the things that you like recommend to people that are experiencing it but still want to be able to have penetrative sex?
Yeah, I recommend different things to different people because,
true.
sex is so subjective and different for everyone. I often I really like it when partners come in because I'm like, this takes two to tango and we all need to be on the same page here. So I might, particularly in the younger groups, get the partners in and just talk about how penetrative sex is nice to have, but not shouldn't be the aim for a successful sex session, particularly. And I'll talk through the anatomy of the female clitoris and how a lot of people with vaginas don't actually orgasm purely from penetration alone. And then that can kind of change the aim of the whole situation, which can be quite helpful. But then I'd be taking it also into account, so particularly in the postnatal or breastfeeding population and the postmenopausal or older population that have gone through menopause, we've got a hormonal level going on that can contribute to pain during sex. So I might be speaking to them about going to their GP to get a prescription for estrogen cream, which can be really helpful for like dry, irritable vaginas. So that's something that I recommend if someone's in a low estrogen state. What's the bumper called that you use? Is the O-nut?
I don't have the O-nut. That was the one that I wanted, but we didn't have that in stock when I got one. So it's actually designed for anal sex. So it's targeted heavily at gay men. I can't remember what the brand name is though.
It's the black and yellow box.
But it's got two parts. Oh, perfect fit. So there's two parts. So one is like the donut ring and then one is a thicker base. So the scrotum can also go through it as well. So it's quite...
I've not seen it.
It's quite a chunky
You might have to send me one.
Yeah, I will. I definitely will. But yeah, it's like, so it's chunky. You can use one bit or both bits at a time. We tend to use one or the other because you do feel it there, Yeah.
Yeah, so the O-nut, I guess, is a similar thing like that. There's these silicone rings and you can stack them to make it thicker so that if it's penis and vagina sex, then it's a bumper, so it stops the penis from going really deep. But the person with the penis has that sensation around the whole shaft, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and the O-nut's quite pretty. You can get like rainbow colours.
That's the one I wanted.
That makes sense.
And then we use vaginal dilators. Do you stop there?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, which is, they're basically trainers. I prefer to call them trainers sometimes because we're not wanting to really like physically dilate the vagina because it is a stretchy organ. It's more about training the muscles to what to do when there is penetration. So that is something that I will, speak about in the first appointment with most people that come to me with painful sex. Some people are ready to dive straight into them then. Some people we need to ease into it a little bit more because they are these, penis-shaped things that you're showing to them.
Yes,
which that go up in size. And it's a gradual progression through the sizes with lots of tips and tricks on how to use it and do it. We stock a vibrating dilator set, which I really like. And I find the vibration for some people can be quite good for pain. I don't really know why that is, but I think that I have a theory in that the vibration is quite a strong sensation, right? Anywhere in your body. And I think that for a lot of people that it kind of drowns out the pain signals. So it allows them to do more or with a bigger object and stuff like that. We also stock like slimline vibrators. So just like those really skinny ones that are long and they can even do a bit of internal pelvic floor muscle release work with it themselves.
True.
Lots of lube. I love Uber lube too. We're just having a bit of trouble because they keep smashing in the courier driver.
Oh no! Yeah, that's the worst. I do customer service, and whenever that happens, I'm like, waste of good lube.
Yeah, I know,
and also like so slippery. All of the packages that
that's the main issue. Just not being able to touch anything else. Hold it in your hands.
Courier drivers slipping.
Yeah, so we're currently trying to find another brand that's not glass, but yes, good lube is worth its weight in gold, and like with the Uber lube. Like if you just buy I don't want to name any brands, but if you buy like ones from the supermarket, you're often just like squirting like half a container everywhere, and then it's like $15 per session. Whereas with the Uber lube, you're kind of just using a little bit, and a little goes a long way, and you're actually saving money. So I always suggest that. Yeah.
And it looks really nice as well. I like that one because it's actually quite like non-confronting for a lubricant. Some of them, the design, it's just hideous in your face. And it's just like, can we just have pretty nice stuff that I can just leave by the bed?
Yeah, the overload I love next to the table looks quite cool.
I was literally taking a picture because I just like put some new art that I got on my like nightstand, and I had a little plant and some candles, and I was like taking a photo and the Oobaloob's in there, and I was like, it kind of adds to it.
Yeah.
Adds a bit of regalness. I don't know. For me, in my opinion.
So do you think that there's anything that we've like missed out of our questions that you think is important for people to know about or hear about?
Yeah, I think it's just really important to see a pelvic floor physio if you're having any issues with sex or bladder or bowels. It's always a good idea to see your GP as well, just to have any tests. And as I said before, if you're not happy with the treatment that they're giving you, then go and see somebody else.
Yeah.
I think it's important not to sugarcoat, or it's really easy to feel embarrassed. But, as health professionals, we hear and see all of this stuff all the time, and there's no need. And to me, I look at vaginas all day, every day, and as soon as you walked out the door, I've forgotten what yours looks like. And it's just like looking at a knee for me. So don't, try not to be embarrassed. Really just tell us everything that's going on, because there's nothing will shock us anymore.
Yeah.
And as I said before, just, buying stuff yourself without having an assessment can possibly make things worse. So if you are doing some things by yourself and things aren't getting better or they're getting worse, then just stop that and go see a physio.
Awesome. Yeah, fabulous. I couldn't agree more, honestly. When I went, I was just like, life-changing, absolutely life-changing stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know that all of our listeners are going to be like taking notes. I'm happy that this is being recorded, so I didn't have to take notes in person.
Yeah.
No problem. It's been fun.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Caitlin.
You've been listening to the Electric Rodeo podcast by Adult Toy Megastore.
Follow Electric Rodeo free on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And to keep up to date with our bucket list progress, follow at Electric Rodeo Podcast on Instagram.